All right, so we're going to take a look at chapter 12 today. This is actually one of my favorite chapters and one of my favorite lessons, just because we get to talk a little bit about like overall program design. So it's a little bit less about, what to do in the middle of like an individual workout and a little bit more about what to do in like a really large example of a workout. So this is going to apply really well to our lessons that we're going to come to later on. But we're going to take a look at like what it looks like to really kind of plan out like an overall cycle. Um, in the world of athletics, that's obviously a pretty big important part of things, considering that like, athletes have specific like on seasons and off seasons. And so that's sort of what we are taking into account here. So our job today, we are going to have some stuff that we're going to need to get through that's pretty self-explanatory, but is sort of like definition worthy, just because it might be a test question someday. But we need to be able to define and describe like the specific acute training variables. So we are going to look at like what a set is, what a rep is, pretty self-explanatory stuff. Then we'll talk about the phases and be able to talk about how to design a program for each phase. So when we think about like what program design is, it's funny, like I call all of these classes at the end of each mod program design classes. That's not officially what they are. I guess officially they are, special population or specific population courses. It's like with this mod, we're talking about athletes. Next mod, we're going to talk about weight loss clients. The mod after that, youths, and then the one after that, seniors. Like officially, I like to call them program design classes because when you think about like what it is on the whole, you are learning how to design programs for like, this person for like their entire like lifestyle, right? Like we're talking about like how to do this over like a long period of time, which is why I think it kind of describes it really well. Like this is, you take a look here, the path to achieve an individualized goal. That's what we're talking about when we say like overall program design. So, it's a planned, purposeful system used to meet those goals. And NASM does this in two ways, right? Number one, it is going to use the OPT model. And the OPT model is a planned, systematic model that we use for our overall program design. So if you take this little model here, and you put it all together, you've got your stabilization side of things, your strength side of things, your power side of things, right? Take all of those and kind of put them together that's those are all kind of three levels of lifting, right? And then within that are a lot of like individualized goals, right? We've got the goal of developing endurance in sort of two different ways, one for stability, which is related to posture, and one that is related to like heavier lifting, like strength. The goal of like muscle gaining in hypertrophy, and the goal of like maximal, just like raw strength gaining in the max strength phase. And lastly, like rate of force production, right? So we got like force production is increasing as we go up. And at the very end, it's like, okay, well, now that we know how to produce force really effectively, let's learn how to do it fast, So that's your entire OPT model. And then NASM is going to use the OPT template, which is sort of our workout sheet that we commonly use to write out our workouts, in order to like, individualize each individual like workout that your client is going into. So if we follow the OPT model, and we use it to fill in our OPT templates, it is kind of like exercise physiology paint by numbers. Like it really does all of the work of periodization and exercise physiology for you in this very systematic way. So that's exactly kind of what we're looking for. Like I want you guys to understand physiology so that you have a deeper understanding of how the OPT model was created. That's why we spend so much time talking about like some of the concepts that we spend our time talking on. But like even if you didn't and you just broke down your client into like 5 individualized goals, and just applied the OPT model, like you're like, oh, well, you're a phase 1 client, you're a phase 3 client, you're a phase 1 client as well. If you just broke it down that way, honestly, you would actually do pretty darn well. Again, like paint by numbers, right? Like, as long as you follow the instructions, it'll turn out fine, But if you want to go a little bit more advanced into that and be even more customized and more individualized, that's where we have sort of a deeper understanding of everything. So it really does kind of take the guesswork out. So obviously, like the thing that separates these, and until now, actually, until now, one thing that you may have noticed is we have spent a lot of our time talking about levels, right? We've talked about level 1, level 2, level 3, but I haven't really spent too much time talking about the difference between like the phases, right? Stabilization's only got one phase in it, right? That's the stabilization phase. The power level really only has one phase in it, that's power. But the strength level's got 3 individual phases within it, and that's because like strength is kind of a big concept that can be broken down, at least 3 different ways. Maximum, like raw, force production, that's your max strength, versus the exact opposite of that, which would be like an enduring strength used for like high repetition exercise. And then sort of in the middle, which is just tearing up your muscles enough that causes them to like just grow really large, right? Like hypertrophy training. So I'm gonna pull up the big chart here. So we've talked individually about like all these phases. Well, or I'm sorry, all these levels. Well, within the phases, there are some distinct differences, and that's where and Thomas and Lorianne, you guys haven't seen this yet, but this is something we're going to work on in the future. This is what I like to affectionately refer to as the big ass chart. So in your textbook, a lot of what we've talked about until now is just exercise selection, right? We talked about like what exercises you're supposed to pick for clients who are in the stabilization level versus the strength level versus the power level, right? We've just talked about like where to put things. Like if your client is in stabilization, we do SMR and we do static stretches, right? We do stage 1 cardio. We do core stabilization. We do balance stabilization, and we do reactive stabilization. And then in our SAQ, we focus on speed drills primarily. And then in the resistance section, we do resistance stabilization exercises, right? Which is going to be, oh my God, typing, please. Which is going to be, either a total body stabilization exercise, chest stabilization, back stabilization, whatever body part you're describing there. So if our client's in the stabilization level, that's what this is going to look like, right? We talked all about that. But what we haven't really spent too much time talking on is how many like sets and repetitions you should be doing, right? Like that's not something we've really covered a lot of until now. Actually, that would be about as high as that. And that's what, this kind of big chart is for. And so in your textbook, you will find these little tables in chapter 14. And actually this is in your regular textbook, your regular NASM textbook. In chapter 14, you will find these little tables here. So here's the max strength table, right? It's not loading. There we go. Here's the power table. So your power table's got all these rules. For your flexibility, here's how many repetitions you should be doing. Here's how many sets, right? Here's the intensity of the lift, which it's a flexibility exercise, so it doesn't have intensity. And then your rest interval, again, it's flexibility, so it doesn't really have a rest interval. But then we go into our core stuff, right? You're going to do about 8 to 12 reps for about 2 to 3 sets. Your tempo should be pretty explosive because it's power. Intensity doesn't apply. And then a rest interval of about 0 to 60 seconds. And that matches up with your balance and your reactive as well. So all the core, all the balance, and all the reactive is about 8 to 12 reps for about 2 to 3 sets. They're all very explosive except for the balance, which obviously you want to do in a controlled manner because it's balance, right? And 0 to 60 seconds rest. For your SAQ stuff, you're going to do about 3 to 5 repetitions of about 3 to 5 sets explosively and take 0 to 90 seconds of rest, picking about 6 to 10 specific drills. So then we get into the resistance section, and the resistance section You'll notice like there's a lot of NAs over here where it's like, no, the intensity is not really applicable. Well, the resistance section, intensity becomes very important because this is literally the resistance, right? Like we are trying to build our strength here, right? Like again, these are kind of like athletic concepts, right? Whereas this is like sort of the goal of like gaining strength. So you're going to do like 1 to 5 repetitions for your strength movements, 8 to 10 for your explosive power movements, and all for about 3 to 5 sets. All of that's going to be at a very explosive tempo. We see our intensity here, which is very complicated. We'll get to that later. And then we take about, here's our rest period. That's also kind of complicated. But you can see, here's all the rules and how we're laying that out. That table is going to look different than, let's say if I open the stabilization table, right? So the stabilization table here, it's not 8 to 12 reps, it's 12 to 20 reps, right? But it's also not like 2 to 3 sets, it's 1, maybe up to 4 sets, right? So we're definitely going to see some differences between each of these. And I actually have that all laid out on one big chart where basically we took all that information and we put the stabilization table in blue, all 3 of the strength tables in green here, and the power table in yellow. So that's another thing that we are going to be looking at here in just a little bit. So before we talk about that, we need to have a pretty good understanding of what all of those individual pieces are. So that is all of those things I just mentioned: reps, sets, tempo, intensity, even your exercise selection, which we have already been talking about, right? In terms of which exercises you choose. Those are what we refer to as acute variables. Acute variables are the individual components of a workout program that determine the amount of stress placed on the body. I think I put that in capitals because I think that's the definition that I've seen on like a piece of homework or something. So that's a little bit of a hint there. But that's what acute variables are for. They determine the type, the amount of stress that's going to be placed on the body, which is going to result in some type of physiologic adaptation. Remember, we talked about this principle of specificity yesterday. The more specific you are about applying, a certain type of stress, the more likely your body is to respond to that type of stress. So, if we consider like determining the amount of stress, if I had a client who wants to gain maximal strength and I have another client who wants to gain endurance, then repetition wise, the maximum strength client is going to get really low reps and the endurance client is going to get really high reps. But in terms of intensity, right, the client with low repetitions is going to be at high intensity and the client with high repetitions is going to be at low intensity. So there's sort of a backwards relationship there. This is why we need to kind of understand each of these things. So, because like if I got a client who tells me they want to gain max strength and I have them, doing high repetitions at low intensity, they're not going to gain max strength. They're going to gain endurance. Looking at our acute variables, the first one is going to be our repetitions. Actually, hold on 1 second. I just want to take a look at one thing real quick before I really launch into this. Okay. So taking a look here, first one we're going to talk about is repetitions, right? So repetitions is a rep or a repetition is one complete movement of an exercise, right? So this is the thing that they like to let you know. It provides you a means by which you can count the time under tension. Here's the dirty, kind of weird secret about repetitions, guys. They matter less than we give them credit for. Like we always say, like, hey, you need to do like a specific amount of repetitions. The reason we do a specific amount of repetitions is because it takes a specific amount of time to get through that number of repetitions. And really what we're trying to target are specific energy systems. Remember, we talked about energy systems when we were talking about cardio. You go from your ATP-PC system into glycolysis, into your oxidative metabolism, right? Well, if you're hitting about 1 to 5 repetitions pretty explosively, you're pretty much staying in the ATP-PC system, right? It'll take you about maybe 10 seconds to get through your full set of repetitions. So that's why the repetitions are actually so low. So what if you were to try to develop max strength and maybe you lifted a little bit lighter, but you did um, you know, really explosive while you did it, and you did 10 repetitions in the same amount of time that it would take you to do 5, is there an argument to be made that that's still going to help with your strength? Actually, yeah, there is an argument to be made there. You're going to be missing out on some of the other parts of, the said principle. But in terms of like metabolism wise, yeah, you'll actually be targeting the ATP-PC system. Um, so repetitions is really just like it's how we count our time under tension. So, is it possible to build max strength with 6 reps? Yeah, sure, if you're moving really quick. But for the most part, we've got some pretty clear rules here. When it comes to repetitions, if we look at the big chart here, if your client's goal is to develop stabilization endurance, right? We're going to see over here, they're going to do about 12 to 20 reps, right? And then if your client's goal is to develop like strength endurance, they're actually going to do a superset of about 8 to 12 repetitions for both exercises, and both exercises for the same body part. So what that really means is you're actually doubling the number of reps that you're effectively doing. You're actually doing about 16 to 24 reps because you've done like chest exercise A plus chest exercise B, right? And so it's 8 for the first one and 8 for the second one. That's 16 reps total. So this is actually strength endurance, the highest repetition scheme that we are going to see on the OPT template. So 12 to 20 in the stabilization phase, 8 to 12 each in the strength endurance phase. Now, hypertrophy, we're going to drop those reps down just a little bit. We're going to drop it all the way to 6 to 12. That's going to allow us to lift a little bit heavier, which is good for muscle growth. We're going to drop the reps even lower for clients in the strength level, or I'm sorry, in the max strength phase, because that, again, is going for maximum raw strength. So now our reps are as low as they're going to get, and our intensity is as high as it's going to get, 85 to 100% here, right? So, pretty intense stuff for the max strength climb. And then in the power level, we do sort of a blend of the high force and high velocity concepts here, right? We've got 1 to 5 reps for our strength movement and 8 to 10 reps for the power movements, depending on how you're applying it. So you can see our reps kind of go down as we climb up the OPT. As we climb up the OPT chart, the repetitions get pretty much lower and lower and lower because our intensity is getting higher and higher and higher. So that's repetitions. They are how we count our time under tension. Then you've got sets. Sets are a group of repetitions in the same way that there is a backwards relationship between reps and intensity. Like if you have a lot of intensity, you have low reps. If you have a lot of reps, you have low intensity, right? In the same way that like if you move this one up, this one drops down. The same thing is true of sets. As your reps go up, your sets will go down. As your reps go down, your sets need to go up. And so we're going to see sort of like as we were climbing the OPT model, right? We saw our repetitions go down. Well, as we climb the OPT model, we're going to see our sets go up. And so if we go back to sort of our big chart here, you can see for stabilization clients, because they were doing 12 to 20 reps, they only need about 1 to 3 sets. They don't need that many, right? Because they're getting a lot of training volume. If you think about like the total numbers here, right? Like multiply 12 by 1 and multiply 20 by 3, your total training volume will be anywhere from well, I don't need to write that out. 12 to 60, right? 12 times 1, 3 times 12. I do need, yeah. So that's what we're seeing there. 12 to 20 repetitions, right? 12 to 60 over the course of all of our sets. Versus in the strength level, we're actually doing, like I said, we're doing, in terms of like strength endurance, we're going to do 2 to 4 sets. And we're raising the sets up because our reps are dropping ever so slightly. So we're dropping down to 8 repetitions or 12 repetitions, right? And again, this is actually 16 to 24 if we think about it, because again, you're doing supersets in the strength endurance phase. But like if we look at that, that's going to be a minimum of 16 times 2, that's going to be 32, and it's going to be a minimum of 24 times 4, that's 32 to 96 reps. So our training volume went up massively in our strength endurance phase. This is probably the highest amount of overall training volume that you are going to see in the OPT model in general. And again, that makes a lot of sense because again, it's all about endurance. So endurance requires lots of repetitions. Then we've got clients who are in the strength level, right? They're going to get resistance strength exercises. They're going to do about 3 to 5 sets, and they're going to get about 6 to 12 repetitions. So that's a bare minimum of 18. That's actually our highest minimum so far, up to about 60 repetitions. So because again, we're going from 1 to 3 sets, up to 2 to 4 sets. Now we're up to like 3 to 5 sets. We're getting a lot of sets in here. And our reps are dropping in response. Then we've got in the max strength phase, this is the most number of sets you're going to do in the whole model, 4 to 6 sets, but it's also the lowest number of reps that you're going to do. And that's all about that raw maximum strength, right? So we're really going to like amp up the sets because we're really dropping the repetitions low. And this actually is not a lot of training volume overall. If you think about it, that's a, you know, at the lowest, I guess, you could technically do like 4 repetitions in a whole workout, times a maximum of about 30, so about 4 to 30. So the overall volume is really low here, which is why we would probably end up re-exposing the body to that multiple times per week in order to see that growth. And then lastly, we've got the resistance strength side of things, plus the resistance power. That's going to give us the power level here. We're going to drop our sets ever so slightly. We're going to go back to 3 to 5 sets here. It's going to drop down just a little bit. And that's in response to the fact that like you are doing superset techniques here and we don't want to overtrain our client. So you'll do 3 to 5 sets of the supersetting between the strength movement plus the power movement. So again, sets and reps have an inverse relationship. As one goes up, the other one's going to drop down. And then we see intensity here again, right? And intensity is the amount of effort compared with your maximal effort. So again, when we're talking about the word intensity in the world of personal training, we mean the amount of effort compared to your 1 rep max. So, you know, do you think doing like a set of as many push-ups as you can do is intense? Like if you're doing it absolutely as many push-ups as you can do, you know, you're just going for total failure, total burnout by the end of it. Is that intense? No, because you're doing a high number of repetitions. It's hard, totally, super hard, difficult, absolutely, right? But it's not intense. Intense is like if you did 1 push-up with like a bunch of like a boulder on your back, right? Like that's our version of the word intensity. So it's the amount of effort compared with your maximal effort. A marathon is not intense, but a 100-meter sprint is, right? So, so typically in terms of like strength training, when we refer to intensity, we are representing it as a percentage of your 1 rep max, your 1 RM. So going back to our assessments class, if you remember when we were doing max strength testing, let's say like, you know, we got to failure and we discovered that we can lift 225 pounds on, you know, our bench press or whatever, right? So if you can do about 225 pounds and that is your, you know, 1 rep max, I want you to work at a specific percentage of that when we're working out. And what that's going to do for me is that's going to help me target that specific rep range and those specific energy systems that I talked about earlier, right? So again, we are trying to hit very specific energy systems. We're trying to hit, and we're doing that by hitting very specific rep ranges. Your intensity can help you with that, right? Like, let's say you didn't actually go into the gym with like a number of reps that you're trying to hit, right? But you're like, I'm not going to target the number of reps I'm going to hit. I'm just going to put 75% of my 1 rep max on the bar and see how many I can do, right? So let's say your 1 rep max is 100 pounds. So you put 75 pounds on that bar. Well, you're probably going to do around 12 repetitions because that's usually what corresponds to that number. about 75% or so. So intensity is the maximum number of reps. And so you're going to see these kind of tied together, right? So if you're doing about 12 to 20 reps, you're probably doing about 50 to 70% of your 1 rep max. And obviously, because that's a range, it's a range similar to how the repetitions are arranged. 70% corresponds with about 12 reps here, and 50% corresponds with, about 20 reps. In the strength endurance phase, it's going to be about 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max. So our intensity climbs because our reps are dropping technically, even though it is endurance. But you're lifting heavy for the 70 to 80% part. It's the beginning of the set. So if your strength movement, again, 70 to 80%, 80% corresponds with pretty close to about 8 repetitions, and 70% again corresponding pretty close to about 12 repetitions. And by the way, these are not flat numbers. Everybody's a little bit different depending on what energy system you are naturally gifted at or naturally good at. Depending on the energy system, you might be really good at like 85% of your 1 rep max and higher, but that 50 to 70% part you just really struggle with. So then those numbers drop even like a little bit lower. It kind of depends on like who you are as like an athlete and what you've trained for, like if you've done a lot of endurance training, you'll probably be able to lift a high number of reps at a slightly higher percentage of your 1 rep max than someone who hasn't done a lot of endurance training. But maybe you've never done any max strength training. So then like your max strength kind of caps out. So it's like, it would be like a little, a chart that kind of slows down like this versus somebody who's like strictly a max strength athlete who doesn't have any endurance. They might be able to lift, 85% of their 1 rep max for, maybe 6, 7 repetitions, which most people can only do for about 5, because that's what they're really good at. But then if you ask them to do like 12 reps, all of a sudden, kind of the chart kind of takes a nosedive. So again, these are not perfect rules. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. I can't tell you how many times I've been absolutely positive that I can lift a certain number of reps after I've done the math, knowing my 1 rep max and stuff, and then I've gone and just not been able to do it, or it's been way too easy. That happens. But generally, 70 to 80% is going to correspond with about 8 to 12 repetitions. So 80% is corresponding to about 8, 70% again is corresponding to about 12. And then we're going to see that not actually match up right here. Let's say you go into the hypertrophy phase side of things. Well, now they're saying, okay, well, if you've been training for hypertrophy for a while, now, all right, 12 repetitions is about 75%. So it's like they're kind of contradicting themselves here, right? They're saying like 12 is 70, 12 is 70. And then down here, they're saying 12 is about 75. But that actually makes a lot of sense when you consider that, like, if this is the type of person that's like trained for this for a while, they would be a little bit stronger in that category. And then we see the low end of about 6 repetitions. That's corresponding with about 85% of your 1 rep max, probably closer to about 82.5%, if I'm being honest, because we're about to see 85 show up again. And that's actually going to correspond to about 5 repetitions, up to 100% of your 1 rep max, which, shocker of the year, how many reps can you do at 100%? 1. That's literally the math that we're calculating out here. So, if I had a client going through each of these different, phases here, and I know, and let's say they don't get stronger for some reason, in my example, because we don't want to deal with that. But I train them for 4 months, and I know that their 1 rep max is 100 pounds. Well, then I would have this person lift between 50 and 70 pounds, so that I can do about 12 to 20 repetitions. The next month, I'd have them lift between 70 and 80 pounds. So it's getting a little heavier, for about 8 to 12 repetitions. It's going to get even heavier. Now I'm going to have them lift 75 to 85 pounds, 6 to 12 repetitions. And then 85 all up to that 100-pound mark that was their maximum from before, for about 1 to 5 repetitions. And so that's how we're going to kind of use intensity. I do want to talk about power here. Power's intensity section is really complicated looking, especially for my new folks. So don't get super overwhelmed by this. But Remember, power is going to utilize supersets. Again, force and velocity. So you have a force exercise, that's your max strength movement, and you have a velocity exercise, that's your power movement, right? So 3 to 5 sets of these supersets, doing them together, 1 to 5 reps for your strength movement, 8 to 10 for your power. So I would do like a really heavy, barbell squat for 1 to 5 repetitions, and I would follow it up immediately with about 8 to 10 squat jumps. So I'd like rack that bar, step off, and go and start jumping. So the max strength stuff's the same. It's 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max, right? Because it corresponds with 1 to 5 repetitions. So that actually, we just copy that straight from here. And then your power movement, there's 2 ways to apply power stuff. The most traditional way is to throw something heavy and do it in an explosive manner. And you will do, if you're doing that version, you're going to pick a weight that's about 10% of your body weight. So if I was doing like a medicine ball throw, I'd pick like an 18-pound medicine ball at the heaviest, right? If I were doing squat jumps and I wore like a weight vest, I'd put like 18 pounds on my back, and that's the explosive part of things. Or I can do about 30 to 45% of my 1 rep max if I'm doing like an explosive version of basically the same exercise. So if I did like a really heavy bench press and then I racked it and took a bunch of the weight off and did it, got that bar and then like went super explosive as fast as I can, I would do about 30 to 45% of my 1 rep max. NASM doesn't really apply it that way. They don't actually show you doing explosive like power barbell style movements, but a lot of the other certifications do. They call that a contrast set, where you do the same movement basically twice, one that's really heavy, and then you do it again, but super, 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 super light. It's a great way to develop power. NASM barely covers that in the textbook though. So honestly, the most common version you're going to see is just up to 10% of your body weight, because NASM's all about like specific power movements like box jumps, squat jumps, medicine ball throws, soccer throws, forward leaps, all that kind of stuff. But if you did like a kettlebell swing, right, which is a power movement that's very explosive and can be very heavy, you're going to pick about 30 to 45% of your 1 rep max. So that's intensity. It's the level of demand compared with your maximal effort. Then we've got rest interval. So as intensity climbs, rest also needs to climb. So this actually has a sort of a linear relationship, right, instead of an inverse one. And so like this is the time taken to recuperate between sets. The really important thing to remember here, guys, and this I think is the sentence that you're going to see, is your rest interval is what determines how much energy you have before your next set. So it determines the energy replenishment before you do your next round of, repetitions. So obviously, the more sets we are doing, the more rest we are going to need between those sets. Or the higher the intensity that we're lifting at, the more rest we're going to need between those sets. Because you can't lift at a high intensity if you don't fully recover between sets. So for stabilization, our rest is actually 0 to 90 seconds of rest. Now, 90 is actually relatively long. The reason it's in there like that, because this is low intensity, you wouldn't think we would need a lot of recovery. And you would be right if you make that assumption. But this is also where we have our beginning clients. So they may need some extra rest. And that's why that's built in here. So 0 to 90 seconds of rest for stabilization. But it could be all the way at 0. I mean, it could be really low. Then you've got clients in the strength endurance phase. We're going to keep it to about 60 seconds of rest. 0 seconds after, always 0 seconds after your superset movement though. Whenever we do a superset, it doesn't matter if it's a NASM, in style endurance superset or power superset or anything like that. Supersets require that there is no rest between exercise 1 and exercise 2. So we take we take as little rest as possible. And then we take about 60 seconds of rest at the end of the superset. So if I did like a bench press followed by push-ups, I would do my bench press, not rest at all, and then immediately do my push-ups, and I would take about 60 seconds of rest. In the resistance strength section, you're gonna do about 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max. So we're gonna take about 0 to 60 seconds of rest as well. That's somewhat similar to strength endurance. And honestly, like, this is where some people disagree with NASM. There's an argument to be made here that taking this up to about 2 minutes might be effective for hypertrophy as well. But NASM is really big on just building as much lactic acid as possible. So taking like 0 to 60 seconds rest is a great way to keep the time under tension and to keep that, like, lactic acid in there, which is going to hopefully, grow those muscles by creating as much like cellular damage as possible. Now, here's rest city. Once we get into the max strength phase, this is the highest intensity possible. High intensity requires what? Lots and lots and lots of rest. So we lift 1 to 5 repetitions at 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max. That's a lot of weight, right? We are going to take 3 to 5 minutes of rest. 5 minutes of rest, literally between sets, just you playing on your phone in the gym. This is why I actually have a hard time doing max strength workouts. I find that they're not very intellectually stimulating just because of the long rest periods. But if your goal is to literally get your body to learn how to lift as heavy as possible, you need to make 100% certain that it is fully recovered in between every set, like fully recovered. You need to make sure that you can absolutely work as hard as you can every single set. The best way to do that is to take plenty of rest in between. So 3 to 5 minutes of rest for that 1 to 5 repetitions. And then we do the same thing in the power section, except it's a little bit different here. You'll notice that it says 1 to 2 minutes between pairs, 3 to 5 minutes between circuits. So this is still relatively heavy, but it's also like kind of focusing on like being very explosive here. If you're just doing a superset for your power level client, you're going to take about 1 to 2 minutes between sets. But if you set it up as a circuit, which can be pretty taxing and kind of complicated to set up in the gym, you're going to take about 3 to 5 minutes of rest between like a circuit. So basically what you would do, if I did just a bench press followed by a medicine ball chest pass, right? That's strength to power. I'd take about 1 to 2 minutes of rest at the end. But if I did a bench press followed by a medicine ball chest pass, followed by like a barbell squat, and then followed by a jump squat, right? So strength, power, and I did like multiple exercises as like a big circuit, I take about 3 to 5 minutes between those circuits. That's going to ensure that like I'm getting adequate rest and, giving my nervous system time to kind of recover between sets. So those are our rest intervals. They can be a little complicated there. And that's really the big ones that we've got, right? When we're looking at these acute variables, we have got, we've got sets, reps, tempo, which I actually haven't talked about yet, intensity, and rest intervals. Where is tempo? Oh my God, tempo's not in my PowerPoint. That is insane. Sorry, we need to talk about tempo before I move on to overall volume. So tempo is the speed at which you are lifting. It is the speed of how you are kind of setting up your, repetitions. So for stabilization, the whole goal is to learn how to, stabilize and hold your joints in a specific range of motion. So our tempo needs to reflect that. We need to actually move at kind of a slow tempo. So let's say I was doing like a shoulder press, right? I would lift at what you can see here is listed as a 4-2-1 tempo. You guys might remember that I mentioned tempos earlier in this mod when we were talking about muscular contractions, right? This is listed representing the 3 parts of every single movement, right? So if you think about the 3 parts of a movement, right? There's the concentric part, there's the isometric part where I'm holding, and the eccentric part, right? I'm shortening my muscle, I'm holding my muscle, I'm lengthening my muscle, right? So those are the 4 parts of a movement. So we have tempos for each of those parts of the movement. The first number always represents how long your eccentric lift should be. The second number always represents how long your isometric lift should be. And the third number represents how long your concentric lift should be. So if I did a 4-2-1 tempo on a shoulder press, it would look like this. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. If I was doing a bicep curl, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I was doing a tricep extension, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it is always kind of listed at the eccentric first, isometric. It always goes EIC, right? Eccentric, isometric, concentric. Doesn't matter where your lift starts, right? Like say, you know, my shoulder press demo and my my lat pull down demo look the same. I know when you get into the gym and you grab that lat pull down bar, the first part of it is the concentric part, right? Well, that's doesn't mean that you're gonna move this number 1 over here and list it as like 1, 2, 4. You're not going to do that. You leave it always, it always goes in the order of eccentric, isometric, concentric. Because remember, you are loading, stabilizing, and unloading, right? So a lat pull down would be 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then we've got our medium tempo. Our medium tempo is your classic lifting tempo. We call it a 2-0-2 tempo, right? So 2-0-2 tempo basically looks like this, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, right? Kind of your just classic medium tempo. You want to take a little pause in there. I don't think it's going to hurt you, you know? In the strength endurance phase, you know, our goal is to still work on like endurance here. So you remember, this is a superset of a strength movement paired together with a stabilization movement. So your strength movement's at the medium tempo, but your stabilization movement is back at the slow stabilization tempo. So you can see like we're really kind of blending out of, you know, stabilization here, right? We're not just making a hard transition right into strength. We're kind of easing our way out. That's why I like to call phase 2, you know, strength endurance. I like to call it like phase 1.5 sometimes, because you really are kind of like, you're not making a hard transition from strength to stabilization. You're making kind of a soft transition. Then you've got hypertrophy, 2-0-2 tempo, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, just medium. Then you'll notice that we've got max strength listed as XXX, which really just means that you are trying to be as explosive as possible. Now, will you actually be explosive with these heavy weights? Probably not. You know, chances are what it'll actually look like is your shoulder press might be like, and then you'll go, you know, like you'll probably be explosive on the eccentric part, but it's a lot of freaking weight, you know, but you are trying to move explosively, even if the weight is so heavy. You know, I've definitely been in like that deadlift where I'm just like, come on, just a bit more, you know, and it's like, man, that one rep took like friggin' 5 seconds, you know, at the very end there. Yeah, that's you're trying though to apply an XXX tempo despite, you know, your best efforts. And then power is obviously XXX tempo for both movements, right? We're just trying to be as explosive, you know, it's literally power, right? So both max strength and power are very explosive, you know, fast tempos there. I can't believe that's not my PowerPoint. I can't believe I didn't notice that the last time I wrote this down. So next thing we got to look at is total training volume. So volume is not listed, right? Like volume is not listed out, but we've already talked about it. It is the sets times the reps, right? So we did this example earlier here. Here's my Excel. So let's take a look at total training volume here, right? I said this yesterday, but you need to make sure, the principle of overload, right? Principle of overload states that you must work out at an intensity that is greater than your body can handle in order for your body to adapt, right? So when we think about like the pieces of things that we can like overload in our client, right? We're going to look at our total training volume, right? So let's say we put sets here, we're going to put reps here, and we're going to put in, intensity here, but we're actually just going to put like weight performed, right? So that's the weight of the lift. And then this will be total volume. Okay. So let's say I was doing, 3 sets of 12 repetitions each time, right? And then I've got, actually here, we'll put another, column here. And let's say this is week 1, this is week 2, and this is week 3, right? If I did something like that, in the first week, all 3 of my sets, I lifted for 100 pounds, right? My total training volume was 36 reps at 100 pounds. So what we're going to see here is that my total progression was about 3,600 pounds worth of, overall volume, right? But now, let's say the next week I come back, I recover, I'm stronger. So now I lift for 105 pounds. And then next week I lift for, 110 pounds after that. Well, now my total training volume has gone up by about 180 pounds every workout, right? 3780 is my total volume. 3960 is my total training volume. So that's what we're kind of looking at there in terms of progressive overload, in terms of like, increasing the weight. But I could also do, increase my training volume by doing something like this. Maybe for the first week, I keep my weight the same, but I raise my sets up, or I raise my reps up. So I did like 8 reps the first week, 10 reps the second week, 12 reps the third week, right? Well, now I still see like an increase in training volume, right? 2,400 up to 3,000 up to 3,600. That's also progressive overload. I didn't have to raise the weight up, I raised the reps up. So if my goal is to gain strength, this is probably my best way to overload. And if my goal is to gain endurance, this is probably the best way to overload. And then there's also the version of just like, well, maybe we keep the weight the same, maybe we keep the reps the same, but now we go from doing 2 sets to 3 sets to 4 sets. And now we're seeing a massive increase between our volumes, right? So that's another way that I could do it. I could increase the number of sets that I'm performing for my exercise, or maybe I could limit the rest, or maybe I could increase the neurologic demand by making the exercise more unstable, right? There's a lot of different ways to apply progression. These are sort of the math ways that make it easy for me to like show you what the math looks like. But if I were to decrease the rest, like if I kept the weight the same, but I did like 60 seconds of rest for week 1, 45 seconds of rest for week 2, 30 seconds of rest for week 3, right? That's still going to be improvements. Or if I did week 1 with both legs on the floor, week 2 in a staggered stance, and week 3 standing on one leg, I'm making it progressively more unstable. Or, I could use pieces of equipment. Week 1 on the floor, week 2 on the little squishy pad, and week 3 on the Bosu ball, which is really unstable. There's a lot of ways to progress things, guys. It doesn't just have to be on by progressing the weight. But if your client is focused on, max like in stabilization endurance, yeah, the thing you should be increasing to make it, progressive and make it harder should be the stability. You should make it more wobbly to make it harder. But if your client's goal is to gain endurance, well, then maybe it's to raise the repetitions. If your client's goal is to gain muscular size, maybe it's to raise up your sets and your volume. And if your goal is to gain strength, yeah, make it heavier, and if your goal is to gain power, also make it heavier. Make it heavier, or like make them have to jump higher. So that's what it is when we're talking about training volume. Now, There is also another thing to remember. As your training intensity climbs, your training volume overall has to drop, because you cannot do high volume and high intensity, right? That's a great way to just make the system break down. You're just going to break the body if you do that, right? And that's definitely not something we want to do. So, in terms of like you might have noticed that like our training volume in the beginning, right? It was 12 times 1 to 20 times 3, right? And then it went into strength endurance. That's where our volume got super, super, super high, right? Where it was like 16 reps at a minimum for 2 sets, up to, that's a minimum of like 32 reps per exercise. And then it was, 96 reps. That's a lot of volume. Well, that's okay to have a lot of volume, like a lot of volume like that, because you're pretty low on the OPT template. But as we go up, our volume overall has to go down. That's why we're only doing maybe 5 repetitions for maybe 5 sets, or up to 6 sets. So you're only doing a maximum of like 30 repetitions per workout. That ensures that you're not going to injure your client. So there is an inverse relationship with training volume here. Now, really quickly, I do want to say, in terms of overall training volume, you also need to consider how many exercises you are doing. Like, let's say you're thinking that you're doing a low amount of volume. You're like, oh, I'm doing a low amount of volume. I'm only doing 3 sets of 12 repetitions. But you're also doing like 6 or 7 exercises per body part. It's like, that's not, if you did like push-ups for 3 sets, and a bench press for 3 sets, and an incline chest press for 3 sets, and a cable fly for 3 sets, that's not 3 chest sets. That's 3, 6, 9, 12 chest sets, right? Your volume, you also need to account for how many exercises you are doing per body part. And this is just a general rule of thumb that NASM will not tell you, but a lot of people agree. So you guys can just kind of load this into your noggin. Generally, what is agreed upon in terms of experiencing strength and muscle growth, you need about 10 total sets per body part per week, up to a maximum of about 20 sets per body part per week. If you're doing about 10 to 20 sets per week, you're in a good place to experience growth. So if you did like 5 sets of 5 repetitions on something on Monday, and then you did that again on Thursday, that's 10 total sets per week. That's about the bare minimum that we're looking for in terms of overall growth, and that'll work. That'll work pretty well. So 10 to 20 is sort of the agreed upon volume per week. Now, frequency, also not listed on the traditional OPT template, but this is the number of training sessions given in a time period. So typically when we're considering like a cycle, we're setting it up the same way that we kind of set up our work week, right? It's usually in like 1 week cycles. So generally, guys, in terms of seeing like strength improvements and improvements in like body composition, you need to exercise about 3 to 5 days per week in order to see like improvements. But even exercising just like 1 to 2 days per week can be okay for like strength maintenance. So if your client is like going through like a deload, you can do like 1 to 2 days that week and like, unload the body a little bit and sort of maintain things. But generally, if you're trying to like see improvements, you need to exercise about 3 to 5 days per week. I'm not saying you need to work each body part 3 to 5 times in a week. That's not what I'm saying. But exercise in general about 3 to 5 days per week. Now, I did put a little note up here. This is an opinion warning. There's a lot of evidence that a lot of experts agree on that the optimal training frequency for growth and strength is hitting a specific muscle twice per week. The classic sort of version of like a bro split, right? Where you do like chest, then shoulders, then back, then legs, then abs and arms, right? That's like your whole week, and then you reset and do the next week. It was really popular for a really long time. You were hitting 1 body part per week because you could basically just like liquidize that body part, that day by just working really, really hard and overdoing it. that was really popular for a really long time, and I'm not fully against it or anything. You know, if that's what works for you, that's what works for you. But what we've seen is that for, you know, sort of optimizing things, revisiting a muscle about twice per week has been shown to be the most effective. And then some people are all about like hitting a muscle 3 times per week, and that hasn't necessarily been shown to be more effective. So 2 is kind of the magic number here. That's why like right now, like I'm doing an upper body split paired with a lower body split, and I do it twice per week. So I do upper body on Monday, lower body on Tuesday, cardio on Wednesday, and I do upper body again on Thursday and lower body again on Friday. And that way I'm hitting those body parts twice per week. Duration is another one. This is the time frame. This definition sucks. I actually really hate this definition because it has 2. It's like 2 definitions with 1 word. I don't know why they didn't just come up with a second word, but duration can either be how long your workout session is or the number of weeks spent in a specific phase of training. So if you're staying in a certain phase for 4 weeks, then your duration is 4 weeks. If you are working out for an hour, your duration is an hour. Literally the same for both. It drives me crazy. Because I'm like, man, I gotta like teach this to people, and like I'm trying to teach you guys, you know, clearly. But that's kind of an example there. So in terms of exercise selection, with stabilization clients, you're going to pick stabilization exercises. Strength clients, you're going to pick strength exercises, and power clients are going to pick power exercises. So there are a couple rules as to what would qualify for stabilization or strength or power movements. Basically, you're going to see total body exercises, such as maybe like a squat, bicep curl to shoulder press, right? You're using your legs, you're using your shoulders, using your arms, right? That is a multi, you know, total body exercise. There's also multi-joint exercises, which are things like a shoulder press, right? I'm moving my shoulder and my elbow, and my wrist is doing a little bit of work as well. That's a multi-joint exercise. And then there's single joint exercises like bicep curls, right? The only thing I'm moving is my elbow joint, right? And really, you know, I guess the wrist a little bit, but for the most part, it's just a single joint. From both the stabilization level and the strength level, you can do all of those, right? There are total body stabilization exercises. There's multi-joint stabilization exercises, single joint exercises, right? Same thing is true on the strength level. The power level, we are never going to do single joint exercises. It would just be very silly for you to try to like have a medicine ball and like isolate your elbows and just go, right? Like this would be silly. It just isn't the kind of thing that we train for, right? We don't do bicep curls like this, right? No single joint stuff in the power level. Only total body or multi-joint. So you got total body like the clean and jerk, and then you've got multi-joint like a medicine ball chest pass, right? Shoulders, elbows, right? All of it simultaneously. So that is our power level, right? So all of this is set up based on what we said yesterday, right? All of this is set up following the sort of general adaptation syndrome approach. We know that like your body will initially respond to a stressor, then it will develop resistance to that stressor, and then over time it will, you know, be more resistant to damage. But if you keep doing the same thing for too long, you'll end up exhausted, and that will result in injury or plateau, all kinds of stuff we're trying to avoid. So NASM has a really nifty way of laying this out, and it's not just NASM, this is everybody. Trainers have a really nifty way of laying this out that we call periodization. And periodization is the concept of dividing your training program into distinct phases of training. Okay, so the things you're going to consider is your yearly plan, your monthly plan, and your weekly plan. So there's a couple different ways that you can approach this. When we look at the annual plan, you can see here, this is the overall, you know, this is called a macro cycle. And this is another one that they'll use like interchangeably. So you got to know both definitions here. The They'll call it a macro cycle, or they'll sometimes call it an annual plan. But the macro cycle, remember, macro means big, right? So a macro cycle is the overall plan for an individual over the course of an entire year. So you're going to go through several different phases as you're training through that year, right? So you can see, here's an example of my macro cycle for a client. And I just did like a 6-month version because I can't get a full year to fit on the page. But you can see we start our client in stabilization in the month of January. We move them into strength endurance for the month of February, and we move them into power for the month of March. In April, we're going to recover from power by doing stabilization. We're going to go back into strength endurance, and we're going to go back into power. So we're just going to kind of repeat, going from phase 1 into phase 2 into phase 5. That's sort of the most traditional approach to periodization, where you're basically just staying in one phase of training every month or so, every 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how you're laying it out. You're going to go through several phases, depending on which month you're in. Then you've got your mesocycle. It's kind of in the middle. This is your monthly plan. And this is the monthly plan, or what phase of training you're going to go through every week. So, for the most part, if we look at our mesocycle here, if our client is in January, which we look up here, January corresponds with phase 1, right? Then I'm going to have them in the stabilization phase for the entire month, which means they're going to get stage 1 cardio on all of their cardio days. And then you can see I kind of set up an A-B workout here, right? They're going to do workout A on Monday. They're going to work out B on Wednesday, back to A again on Friday. Next week, they're going to flip it around. B, A, B, A, B, A, right? So just slightly, setting things up. It's always stabilization every single time. And then if we look at my microcycle, you can see this is my, my weekly plan. Workout A is a stabilization workout. Workout B is a stabilization workout. And that's how that fits within my sort of mesocycle here. So, whoops, that is way too far zoomed out. So that is, those are all examples of, like, if I'm doing what is called linear periodization, I'm basically staying in a straight line every single month. Now, linear periodization is the most common approach to things. It's what we'll often describe, when I'm sort of giving you examples and stuff. Oftentimes I'm describing linear periodization, right? I'm just saying, hey, you're in phase 1 for month 1, phase 2 for month 2, phase 3 for month 3, back to phase 2 for month 4, like whatever, right? We're laying it out one phase at a time every month. But what if you're an athlete, right? You're in the middle of the season and you don't want to lose your strength, but you also need to make sure you're not working too hard. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to play your games very effectively. So you need to have kind of a blend of gentle workouts and a blend of hard workouts. Well, that's where what we call undulating or undulated periodization comes in. And so linear periodization is performed one phase of training for an extended period of time, usually 1 month's time. So 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how you're doing it. Undulating periodization is actually utilizing multiple phases of training within a given time period. So if we take a look here at our macro cycle, you can see I've got a blend of linear periodization and undulating periodization. So for January, this is probably like the preseason for my athlete, right? So leading up to the season, in January, they're going to do corrective exercise. In February, they're going to work on their endurance. And in March, they're going to develop their power. And then in April, May, and June, that's the on season. Now my athlete has like games to worry about. I want to make sure they're not super exhausted or anything like that. So I'm going to have kind of a blend of corrective workouts over the course of the week that'll be pretty gentle, probably after their game. An endurance workout, sometime throughout the week to maintain their endurance, and a power workout to maintain their power. So we're going to look at the month of April here. So here's my mesocycle for April. They're going to use phases 1, 2, and 5. Workout A, B, and C. Workout A on Monday, workout B on Wednesday, workout C on Friday. And they're just going to repeat that. And then you'll notice, because these are 3 different levels, they're getting stage 1 cardio on Tuesday, stage 2 cardio on Thursday, and stage 3 cardio on Saturday. And I scroll down and I look at my microcycle. Workout A is a stabilization workout. Workout B is a strength and endurance workout. And workout C is a power workout. So that is how we are kind of setting up our periodization. How are we doing so far, guys? I know that like I'm on tables here and this can sometimes get a little complicated and a little tricky. How's everybody following along so far?
I'm good.
Feeling good? Yeah, a lot of thumbs up. All right, cool. All right, if you have questions, stop me. But there are a lot of ways to lay this out. If we look at like NASM periodization, what if I can find examples? What if I can find some good images of this? I'm not sure. You know what? Actually, I know that I'm going to spend all day Googling this, so I'm just going to open up the book here. Oh no, where is it? I know I've got that PES book here somewhere on the computer. Dang it. Hold on a second. Let me get on my email. I'm searching for so let's go PES. Bang, there we go. Okay, let me download this real quick. All right, so oops. Oh no. Resume. All right, here's your PES textbook. I'm gonna go ahead and open this up here. And there we go. Are you gonna open? Okay, let's scroll down to some athletes here. Let's look at some specific examples. All right, so in the back of your book, there are some really good example programs. I think this is the strongest part of the entire sports performance book. But if you go to the very end here, it has a ton of example programs. So like I said, here's an example of your client going through like a macro cycle, right? So you would do a little bit of, this is what their season looks like, right? They're in the off season all the way from January to July. August is the preseason, and then they're in mid-season in September, October, and November and December, right? So we don't want to work our client too hard while they're in the middle of the season. So we're really focusing on just keeping them in the stabilization phase the entire time. So the rest of their stuff looks like this, right? Their first month after the season is over, we put them into a corrective exercise routine. This is literally like a month off, basically. They're doing corrective exercise. It's really, really gentle, probably just a lot of yoga and things like that. Then in February, it's like, all right, well, let's start building a little bit tougher. We go into stabilization. March, we go into strength endurance. April, we go into power. And then we go back into stabilization, back into strength endurance. And then for July, they've got an undulating periodization. And in August, they've got undulating periodization. So, you can see this would probably be a blend of phases 1, 2, and 5. Probably, again, phase 1 on Monday, phase 2 on Wednesday, phase 5 on Friday. And they do that for 8 weeks. So that's sort of what that looks like. Then in the in season, we're just doing corrective exercise. So that's not a bad example, but there are a ton of examples in your book. If you scroll to the back of your book, at the very end, you'll see all of these example programs. Is it the very end? Yeah. And I have them for like some of our most sort of the most common sports that are out there. So here is a program for a baseball athlete, right? So it's got a little bit of information on like the demands of the sport. You know, for the most part, you know, they're only going to be sprinting for about 4.4 seconds. So if you're working on sprints that are any longer than that, it's really not doing much for you. So here's some like, you know, just general information about the sports, special information about like pitchers and catchers, and then which assessments we think are the most effective: overhead squat, single leg squat, Harvard step test, vertical jump, rotation medicine ball throw, some speed assessments, some agility assessments, right? It's just got some really good like choices for you to have. And then here is our off-season plan. For off-season, we're just going to do a little bit of stabilization, strength, endurance, and power, right? And so their schedule might look something like this. Monday would be, you know, corrective. Tuesday they would take off. Wednesday would be corrective. Thursdays they would take off. Friday would be corrective. Saturdays and Sundays off. So this is definitely like, you know, a very corrective phase here. Then month 2, they're doing 3 days per week, stabilization level, right? Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Month 3, they're doing 4 days a week where they're doing strength and endurance workouts on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And they've got conditioning workouts Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays. So you can see this little blank day here. They don't have any strength work on Tuesday, but they're probably doing a whole bunch of like conditioning drills. We're doing a lot of cardio, right? So this is kind of how they've got this laid out. And then there's also some example programs here, right? You can see they've got, you know, their warm up, they got their core and balance, plyometrics, and then resistance section down here. So they got some really good examples of this. That's baseball. I think they got baseball, football, basketball, golf, hockey, and I want to say boxing. I think those are the ones that are in the book. But anyway, we're kind of doing sort of a blank example here. So that's the difference between like linear periodization, which is just one phase of training per month, versus undulating periodization, which is actually using sort of like multiple phases of training every month. So again, looking at how these sort of phases and how these levels sort of all interact together, we have to have a good understanding of like what all of our acute variables are for each phase, right? So stabilization level, you're focused primarily on corrective exercise and developing stabilization endurance. How do we apply that progressive overload that I talked about? Well, you're going to progress things by enhancing the proprioception, meaning that like you are making it harder by making the exercise more unstable, right? So if I was training Thomas and, you know, he's in the corrective exercise phase or in the stabilization endurance phase, I would say, all right, we're going to do a single leg shoulder press today. And so he's doing a single leg shoulder press and then he kills it. He absolutely crushes it. And I need to make the exercise harder. I'm not going to make it heavier. I mean, I could do that, but that's not really matching up with my goals here, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, Thomas, now I want you to do that single leg, but I want you to stand on this squishy mat. And that squishy mat is going to make the exercise kind of wobbly. That's what's going to make it harder. Or I can even just say something as simple as like, hey, close your eyes. That actually does challenge your balance a little bit more. So little things like that are how I'm going to enhance the proprioception. Clients who are in the strength level, well, strength endurance, we are going to do a little bit of like, you know, stabilization and strength together. So, you know, we're getting a lot of things here. We're getting strength, we're getting stability. We're also going to experience some muscle growth. But in the strength endurance level, phase 2, I'm really focusing on, you know, increasing their endurance. So what am I going to do to make it harder? I'm probably going to say, try to increase the reps, right? Or, you know, it is still strength based. So yeah, maybe I will decide to make it harder by raising the weight, and it is still kind of stabilization based. So yeah, maybe I'll also make it harder by making it more unstable. There's a lot of different ways to make things harder in phase 2. Hypertrophy clients, we're all about cellular adaptations. We're just trying to make the muscles as big as possible. How do I make it harder? Make it heavier. And maybe try to do more reps. Like you're really just trying to create as much damage as possible. That's what's going to blow those muscles up. If your client's in the max strength phase, we're focused on neurological adaptations primarily. And those neurological adaptations are all directly related to strength. So how do I make it harder in the max strength phase? Make it heavier. That's it. Throw as much weight on there as possible. Literally, it's all about maximum strength. For power training, we're supersetting force and speed. So how do we make it harder? Well, I can make it heavier. That's the force side of things. Love that. Good choice. But I could also increase the speed of things. I could say, well, I also want you to jump on, instead of a 12-inch box, we're going to have you jump onto a 14-inch box, right? Just by making things a little bigger, that'll also make it a little bit more challenging. So force and velocity, right? And then there's maximal power training, which is the sports specific phase 6 that doesn't officially exist. So I want you guys to hear this and then forget it. This is basically enhancing things that are even more sports related. So I would pick, something that's even heavier or even more explosive, even faster. And it would all be very, very, very much related to their sport in particular. So that's what the OPT model is, guys. We've got a lot of different ways we can apply this in terms of like setting up our entire year. We do need to remember all these, like, what a set is, what a rep is, and things like that. And there's all kinds of different ways that we're applying stress. So I've got a whole bunch of examples here. Let's take a look at a client who's in stabilization here. So here's my client who's in month 1. We're going to say this is the same client, right? This is our client. His name's Ethan. So we're going to progress this client through 5 months of training. Do you need to use every single phase of training with every client? Not really. Hypertrophy clients aren't really going to benefit from power training, for instance. But for my example here, we have a client who wants to be a jack of all trades, master of none. So he wants to go through all 5 phases of training. So for month 1, I'm going to pick corrective exercise, right? Look at the big chart. I'm going to follow all my rules here. Because this is month 1, I got to stay in the blue section here, right? So I'm going to pick corrective exercise. So I'm going to pick foam rolling and static stretches. And I'm going to do those for 1 to 3 sets, 30 seconds hold on each rep. And we can see that reflected here, right? So he's going to foam roll his calves, hip flexors, and lats for 1 set, 30 seconds each. And then he is going to do a static calf stretch, a static kneeling hip flexor stretch, a static ball lat stretch. Then if we look at his cardio, we're doing gentle, little warm up here on the treadmill for about 5 minutes to kind of get his blood pumping. Then we're going to move on to his core stuff. Go back to here. I'm going to pick core stabilization exercises, balance stabilization exercises, and plyometric stabilization exercises. And I'm going to fill in my acute variables using all of these rules here. 1 to 4 sets, 12 to 20 reps. 1 to 3 sets, 12 to 20 reps. 1 to 3 sets, 5 to 8 reps. And we can see that here. So we went with 3 sets for all of them. We did 12 reps for the core. We did 6 reps each for the balance, because that's what it says here, right? 12 to 20 reps if it's a double-sided, which it literally never is, or 6 to 10 reps for single-sided. So we went with 6 each. And then a plyometric for 5 to 8 reps, we chose to do 8. So prone iso abs, that's a core stabilization. Single leg lift and chop, that's a balance stabilization. Box jump to stabilization is reactive stabilization. Tempo is going to be slow, and then it says 3 to 5 seconds here. That's because my tempo is slow, and it says hold your landings 3 to 5 seconds. And then 0 seconds of rest. For each of these, And I'm clearly doing this as a circuit. So I'm gonna take 60 seconds of rest at the end. And then I would go back and do, you know, sets 2 and sets 3. So that is my movement prep. And then I decided to give him a total body routine where he is going to do a total body movement, chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and legs. So ball, squat, curl to press. And you know, each of these are stabilization versions, right? If I look at this, 1 to 3 sets. So I chose 3. 12 to 20 reps. I went right in the middle and chose 15. Tempo is 4-2-1. So I listed 4-2-1 on my tempo for all of these, with the exception of the total body movement. With total body, I never tell my client to do 4-2-1 because literally it would be like you would squat 1, 2, 3, 4, hold your squat 1, 2, stand, do a bicep curl 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It would literally take you like 18 seconds per rep, which would be kind of silly. So instead of doing that, we just say slow. And then I've got this whole thing performed as a circuit. No rest till the very end. And then he rests and goes back to the top. And those are all stabilization exercises. And then I just copied my cool down. My warm-up is the same. My cool down is the same as my warm-up, with the exception of the cardio being first instead of last. So let's take a look at Ethan in his next month of training. Let's move him into strength endurance. So Ethan has progressed now. He did pretty well in his first month. We're going to make it a little bit harder for his second month by moving him into the strength level. So now he's getting a strength endurance workout, which means I'm no longer doing static stretches because I'm not applying corrective flexibility. Now he's getting active flexibility. So he's going to get a little bit of foam rolling, and he's going to get active, isolated stretches. 1 to 2 sets, 5 to 10 reps. I'm going to hold each rep for about 1 to 2 seconds. So it's going to look like this. Foam roll, calves, hip flexors, and lats, kept that the same. You know, that's literally exactly the same as it was last time. But instead of a static calf stretch, now he's getting an active calf stretch. Instead of a static kneeling hip flexor stretch, he's getting an active kneeling hip flexor stretch. Instead of a static,
what's going on? You know what I mean? Brad,
can
you tell me what active versus a static is again, please?
Yeah. So take a look right over here. Actually, you can see it in the workout. Let me open up my other one. So notice how we do like just a 30-second hold for my duration for my stretch, right? But over here in my active stretches, it says do 2 sets of 10 repetitions. And then it says hold each rep for only 1 to 2 seconds. So let's say I'm doing a pectoral wall stretch, right? Because you can see it on camera a little better. So if I'm doing a pectoral wall stretch and I go like this and I hold it for 30 seconds, that's a static stretch. But if I pull myself into a stretch for like 1, 2, and then I release the tension, and then I pull it into a stretch for 1, 2, and then I release the tension, and I go 1, and I do that for 10 reps, that's an active stretch. And then if I wanted to do a dynamic stretch, I would do something like this. I'm not really even holding. I'm just using my muscles to draw myself through a full range of motion, right? Or maybe, yeah. So there's a little bit of difference there, right? If you're holding for about 1 to 2 seconds, it's active. If you're not really holding at all and you're just kind of moving through a full range of motion, it's dynamic. And if you're holding it for full 30 seconds, it's static. So then we've got our core stuff, our balance core and reactive, our movement prep, right? So now instead of doing like a plank, which didn't move the spine, I'm doing a ball crunch, which does move my spine. Instead of doing a lift and chop, which didn't move my balance leg, now I'm doing a Romanian deadlift, single leg Romanian deadlift, which does move my balance leg. Rather than doing a squat jump to stabilization, which didn't move after I land, now I'm doing repeated squat jumps, which does move after I land. So I am choosing core strength, balance strength, and plyometric strength. So just slightly different versions of the same concepts from before. You know, I always use this. This is an example. I mean, this example is lost on me because I didn't play Pokemon as a kid. This is a weird example, but the game of Pokemon, this is such an amateur, like trying to explain it, is that like these little creatures, these little monsters, pocket monsters, they have 3 different forms. They evolve, right? So they have like 3 differences, right? Like they start off looking like this guy, and then they look like this guy, and then they become this guy. My roommate loves it. I wish I had played it as a kid because everybody I know like knows more about this than I do. That's kind of how NASM's set up. You got your stabilization stuff, it evolves into strength stuff, and then it evolves into power stuff, you know? It's like, you know, you learn how to play Go Fish as a kid, then you learn how to, you know, play like gin rummy. And then it's like, all right, well, now I'm gonna go to Vegas and try and like gamble. You know, you learn, you know, the basics before learning the advanced versions. So we didn't move the spine. Now we're moving the spine, right? And that's what we're seeing here. I feel like I'm in the weeds with my examples now. So let's take a look at our big chart. We're going to pick 2 to 3 sets for all of these exercises here. And then it's 8 to 12 reps, 8 to 12 reps. And this freaking guy is 8 to 10 reps, which is so annoying. So I always just do 10 reps for everything. So 3 sets, 10 reps, medium tempo, except for repeating tempo for my explosive. And then again, I'm doing this as a circuit, 0 seconds of rest in between. Now, in the strength endurance phase, we got to do that superset thing we talked about earlier, right? So because it's a superset, I need to list this out as telling my clients like, look, we're doing straight sets for all the movements, and you're going to perform all sets of a superset before moving on to the next pair. So this is going to be horizontal loading, right? Rather than like the circuit style we did last month. Last month, we did exercise A, then B, then C, then D. Then we went back to the top, A, B, C, D, right? Not this month. This month, they're doing the superset thing. So they're going to go A, they're going to do exercise A, then B, rest, A, B, rest, A, B, rest. Then they'll move on to C, D, rest, C, D, rest, right? So you can see that laid out here. I said 0 seconds of rest for the first movement, 60 seconds of rest for the second movement, and it's straight sets. So these are paired together, these are paired together, these are paired together, and these are paired together. So they're going to do a bench press, which is a strength movement, and they're going to pair that with a stability ball chest press, which is a stabilization movement. They're going to do a barbell row paired with a stability ball row, right? So strength to stabilization. That's how we apply strength endurance, right? Resistance strength plus resistance stabilization. And then all of those reps and sets that we talked about earlier, right? So I need to pick between 2 and 4 sets. So I went with 3. I need to pick 8 to 12 repetitions. So I went with 12. And I need to do a 2-0-2 tempo for my strength movement and that 4-2-1 tempo for my stabilization. So you can see exercise A is always 2-0-2 and exercise B is always 4-2-1. And then in my cool down, this is the one thing that sometimes gets a little confusing. That's weird. This sometimes gets a little confusing for my new folks. You'll notice that I did static stretches in the cool down, and you might be thinking like, wait. You said this client was in phase 2. Why are we doing static stretches? The cool down doesn't matter. The cool down, the reason we don't do static stretches in the strength level is because static stretches leave you less strong. That's why we had to invent a different type of stretch, right? We didn't want to lose our strength. So we came up with active stretches instead. In the cool down, it doesn't matter though. I don't care if I reduce your strength before you leave the gym, you know? So you'll notice in all of my examples, the cool down is always static stretches. All right, let's move on to our next client. This is a client who is in the hypertrophy phase, which this should say hypertrophy. That's not good. So if we look at the hypertrophy phase of training here, right? We are in March, so this is the 3rd month, phase 3 now. So taking a look, we're still going to do pretty much the same warm-up. I actually get to keep everything the same. Look at the chart here, guys. Notice how strength, endurance, hypertrophy, and max strength, nothing changes in terms of the warm-up, in terms of flexibility, cardio, core, balance, reactive, SAQ. It's all the same for all 3 phases. The only difference between the phases is when you get into the resistance section. That's where there's some different numbers. So you know what I did? I literally kept it exactly the same. His warm-up for month 3 is the same as his warm-up for month 2 because they're both strength level. His movement prep for month 3 is the same as his movement prep for month 2 because they are both the strength level. Now, would I do this in real life? No. But I think it makes a really good example for you guys to see that I didn't have to change anything necessarily because they're the same, right? They're the same level. And then I got into strength movement, and I'm going to do straight sets again. So I said straight sets for each exercise, perform all sets in a particular movement before moving on to the next one. So again, horizontal loading. And we did a total body, chest, back, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and legs. And we did 4 sets of 8 repetitions for everything because we're in the hypertrophy phase, which is right over here, right? I needed to pick between 3 to 5 sets, so I went right in the middle and went with 4. I needed to pick between 6 and 12 reps, so I went right in the middle and went with 8. I picked a medium 202 tempo because that's the rule, and I take 0 to 60 seconds of rest, so I chose 60 seconds of rest for everything. So this is a total body routine right here. And that's kind of a classic hypertrophy, that would work really well. Cool down, static stretches, like I said. All right, let's take a look at month 4. Ethan is getting stronger. He got a little bigger last month by doing hypertrophy. Now he is, god dang it, in the max strength side of things. So again, it's still the strength level. So I didn't change the warm-up. I didn't change the movement prep. And now I am going to change the resistance section. So now I'm going to pick between 4 to 6 sets. I went with 5. I'm going to pick between 1 to 5 reps. I also went with 5. So 5 sets of 5 reps. My tempo is XXX. So XXX tempo for all. I picked 3 to 5 minutes of rest. So 3 minutes of rest. And it is all straight sets again. And I actually picked the same exercises from last time. Deadlift to calf raise, bench press, bent over row, military press, barbell squat. Again, the exercise selection within the strength level is the same. I know this is actually, chances are if I were to actually do this with somebody, they'd probably plateau just a little bit because I'm not really changing the exercises up, nor am I, I'm kind of keeping things really, really similar. But I did that on purpose because I want you guys to know there's no difference between movement prep in strength endurance than there is in max strength. The only difference is when you get to the resistance section. That's where things change. So my example version here, I kept very much the same every time to kind of draw that example. Lastly, we do have to change things up. Now we're in the power level. So now we are fully in phase 5. This is the most intense phase where things are going to get really, really difficult. So now I'm going to move down to the yellow section here. I need to apply functional flexibility, which means I am going to do a little bit of foam rolling plus dynamic stretches. So a walking lunge with a twist, inchworms, T push-ups, and arm circles, right? I need to do that for 3 to 10 exercises. I chose, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I needed to do it for 1 to 2 sets of 10 to 15 reps. So 2 sets, 15 reps each. And then it says the arm circles, do them forwards and backwards. So technically that's, twice as many. Then we are going to pick core power, balance power, and reactive power exercises. 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps for everything. So what do we do? What the? What do we do? We chose, that's so weird that it said that. Why are you like this? I've already saved you. Yeah, replace it. So sorry. You can see 3 sets, 12 reps, right? XXX tempo, except for the balance one, which obviously we hold our landing for 3 to 5 seconds. And then we still do it as a circuit, 0 6. By the way, I've been doing circuits this whole time and all the movement prep stuff. You don't have to. It's just an option. Then we get into the very complicated power side of things where we do a strength movement first. We superset it with a power movement second. So my bench press is a strength movement. We saw that in the last phase of training. In fact, we saw that in the last 3 phases of training. And then we pair it with a power movement, the medicine ball chest pass. So you can see, perform supersets as straight sets, perform each superset for all of its assigned sets before moving on to the next superset. So they're going to do the bench press, then the medicine ball chest pass, then they'll rest for 3 minutes, then they'll repeat, rest for 3 minutes, repeat, rest for 3 minutes. They're going to do 4 sets of that, and then they'll move on to the next pair. So we got this pair, this pair, this pair, and this pair. And that is how they're going to kind of work their way through. 4 sets of 5 repetitions for the strength movements, 4 sets of 10 repetitions for the power movements, both at explosive tempos. So it's 1 to 5 reps for your strength, so we chose 5. It's 8 to 10 reps for your power, we chose 10, right? And there we go. That is 5 months of training for our clients. Now, there are better examples in your textbook in those final pages that I mentioned earlier, right? If you flip to the end of your book, you will see a bunch of examples of strength endurance programs, hypertrophy programs, max strength programs. There's a lot of really good stuff back there, guys. So don't be afraid to kind of dive into the final pages of the sports book. It's one of the strongest parts of the sports book. It has a lot of really, really great examples. And that is 5 months of training. I could use those workouts for a full year if I needed to, and be like, and just shuffle them around and be like, we're going to do the first one, then we're going to do the second one, then we're going to do the first one again, then we're going to do the second one again, then we're going to skip to the 5th one, then we're going to go do the 3rd one. I could jump all around the OPT model if I wanted to. And I could keep those workouts and use them in my job and just give them to multiple clients. That's called a canned workout. I don't recommend it because you're not customizing it to your client and their goals. But they can be like really good example programs that you can show people. And that is about it for today, guys. Oops. I clicked the wrong button. How's everybody feeling? You guys got any, how y'all feeling today?
Good.
I'm feeling
Fabulous.
good. It's cool.
Awesome. That is definitely our biggest content. This was the biggest day of class with the most information. So just like in the world of training, we just hit our peak. So now we're going to kind of back off a little bit. Next couple of days will be a little gentle. So Monday, we're going to talk about, I think it's injury prevention on Monday. Yeah, so we'll talk about injury prevention, which will be kind of fun. You get your final piece of homework. Then on Tuesday, we are going to meet up. We are actually not meeting at Sochi. We are going to be meeting in the park. So we're going to meet at Van Nuys Park soccer fields. We're going to be meeting at this outdoor park right here, the Van Nuys Sherman Oak area, and it's got these 3 really cool soccer fields, and we're going to kind of take those soccer fields and kind of just take a little corner to ourselves. We're going to set up some really fun circuits and stuff. and run through some of this athletic SAQ stuff. So I will be emailing the details for that out on Monday to get you guys ready for Tuesday. Then next week, for those of you who want to do it, we're going to have our final exam on Wednesday. That's not optional. You have to do that. We're going to meet on Zoom and we're going to play a little review game so that everybody feels really confident for the final exam. Then on Thursday, Sochi is being, Thursday is here. We're actually being audited. This happens once a year where basically another personal training school is going to come to visit us. And they're going to see like what we're all about, and they're going to see sort of like how our program runs and what class looks like and stuff. So we wanted to kind of show them, since we don't meet in person, you know, we meet on our regular test days. They didn't schedule themselves to show up on an in-person day. So we wanted to show them a blend. They're actually going to audit us on Thursday and Friday. But I wanted to give you guys the options. I'm actually going to be teaching a recorded Zoom lesson like normal, but at Sochi. So if you guys want to come in on Thursday in person, we'll actually be doing an in-person lecture, which will be really awesome. It'll be a chance for me to kind of show you guys a traditional version of like what, you know, sort of a whiteboard version of class looks like. And then other of you guys can log in on Zoom and stuff. So that'll be next Thursday. That'll be a really fun day. And then Dalen and Andres, you guys are headed to Motown. So you actually will probably also be there Thursday, but meeting with him instead of with me. So
I'm looking forward to going back outside. Missed that.
oh, I know, right? Yeah, it was kind of fun. But at the same time, like, I'm glad to have a freaking building again.
Oh, for sure. Sure.
Felt like refugees for a full year. All right, ladies and gents, I get to say that now because I got 3 ladies in. Normally it's like, I got a pretty good distribution today. I will see you guys on Monday. I hope everybody has a really great weekend. Do something fun, have a blast, and I will see you guys Monday morning.